Don't wait till the night before Christmas to be good.
Three, two, one. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 11 of the 8th annual 12 podcast of Christmas. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Francois the Nation.
I'm Andrew Sorsdahl.
And I'm James Vanderbeek. From
Dawson's Creek.
From Dawson's Creek. We just had a brief intermission in between episode 10 here with the guest that we just had on. Set looks a lot like episode 9, very different. And we were actually just talking about my nephew just received a cell. I don't know if he just received it, but apparently he has a cell phone number now. And I don't know, he's like 12 at the oldest.
You don't know how old your nephew is?
Man, there's like 7 of them.
Okay.
You want to talk about people's birthdays and knowing how old they are?
I knew I got it right first try, so.
Yeah, first fucking try, all right. Anyway, so I posed the question to Andrew as a father. When is the appropriate time to A, give a cell phone, B, be allowed on social media, C, start having sex in your house?
Oh, geez.
Start having girls stay over.
That's one I couldn't answer. I'm definitely...
Cell phone first?
Cell phone. To me, that's a good... It has to be case by case, because like my sister got a cell phone, but we're talking like one that couldn't even text and was just a flip phone to call. And she got that when she was like, 11 or 12, but that was because she was at dance and we needed to be able to know, like, have a reliable way to like.
Yeah, kids don't like calling anyway. So
exactly. So that doesn't count exactly. So like if it's a scenario like that, I can see there being like a reason or an exception that contradicts this personal opinion. But as far as I'm concerned, he doesn't need a cell phone until he's in high school.
What does that look like?
So like 14, like maybe somewhere between grade 8 and grade 9.
Now, Fran, as a son, how do you feel about that?
I fucking never give him a cell phone. I don't care. Fuck it. Like, I don't, if I could, I would get rid of every fucking smartphone in the world. I hate them. I think they're terrible. They're rotting our brains.
Okay, Andrew, now, social media for your son.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he'll not without supervision until he's in high school. Like, I don't know.
Are we again talking 14? Are we talking a little older?
I would push for a little bit older, but it all depends on the scenario, and like I would have to like be in that moment to be able to know for sure. Because one thing I learned about parenting.
So are we talking like a phone text plan and then give him data later so he can't be doing social media stuff when you're not knowing about it?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to think about that one. I mean,
you're a few years away, but
access to the internet. Yeah, I mean, I think unrestricted access to the internet is something that, if he's smart enough, whatever controls I put on that are only going to last until he's old enough or smart enough to figure out how to get around those.
Now, Fran, as somebody who was impeded from accessing unfettered internet
Very
until
easy to
quite
get
late,
around basically anything your parents do.
Tell us a little bit about your opinion on this, Fran. Access to internet, unfettered access to the internet.
If they try to restrict your access to pornography, I mean, like, it's probably different, but it's easy, very easy. Fucking factory reset the phone. Basically any device you have, if they try to put any sort of blocks on it, factory reset it. First things first. That's gonna get rid of everything. So it's easy. It's super easy. Nobody can stop you from doing anything. The world is your oyster. Don't let them stop you.
Yeah, I think it's more so about open conversation and talking about internet safety.
Let's call it dialogue.
Open dialogue, sure.
Let's call it dialogue.
And just, obviously having a conversation about internet safety and all that, the sex ed stuff that's going to be super fun to have a conversation about one day.
Now, getting to that, when is a girl allowed to stay over? And then I'm going to address us with a small story from my childhood, which I probably told the podcast 100 times.
I don't know. That's an interesting question. It would have to depend on the conversations that we had already had about sex and relationships and intimacy. I obviously am not a boomer, so to a large degree, would consider myself to be a fairly sex positive person. I think that, your sexuality is a big part of who you are as a person. And so like denying,
we know it's a big part about who you are. As a person.
denying that, that exists at, when you're a teenager isn't all that leads to is like negative things. So there would have to be a conversation around that. I know this is kind of like ramblings. I just don't know exactly if there's a specific age or like, when he's mature enough to, show me that he can handle, the responsibilities of being a sexually active person, then that would be a thing that could
Francois,
happen.
did your parents ever let a girl stay at your farm when you lived there?
Immediately the second I had my first girlfriend.
Which is fucking crazy to me.
Yeah. No, my
Did they
parents
block
never
your
had-
porn, but the real
never-
life thing?
Well, that was before that. It was weird. It almost seemed like between, when was that, like grade 9 maybe? I don't know. Like grade 9, 10, there was just this philosophical switch where it was just not real. Like there was a lot. It was like over maybe bearing a little bit. I don't even know if it was overbearing. I don't know how to describe it. It was weird, but it seemed like there was kind of weird intrusions type deal. And then there was a switch, and then it was just kind of like, my parents sort of implicitly trusted me from the time I was in grade 10. It was like, if I was like, I'm doing this week, I'm gonna be gone for 3 days. It's like, sure. It's like I don't know. It was interesting. Like that's the thing. I never like gave them any reason to fuck with me, really.
Yeah, I had a fairly adult relationship with my parents from grade 9 on, basically, just because same thing. Like I got good grades and I was pretty responsible, and so my parents were very much, and we talked about it. They're very much of the mind of, if you behave like an adult, we will treat you like an adult. And the second that you start fucking up, then things are going to change. But as long as you don't fuck up, then
now a slight
world's your
variation
oyster.
from my perspective on what Andrew just said. So your parents said, if you act like an adult, we'll treat you like an adult. And my parents said, you will act like an adult and we will treat you like an adult. I.e., I never had like my parents never told me not to drink or fuck one time. Like they never even said nothing about like, one time my mom was like, you're on like, it's like, if you've got all your shit done, be on the Nintendo and we're going to be downstairs having a drink. So it's like, don't disrupt us. Like there was never like I moved in, my dad said, bathroom's over there, help yourself to the fridge. There's no Santa. Don't put your teeth under the pillow. That's fucking disgusting. And if you're going to bring the car back, make sure the tank's full.
And you were how
I
old?
was 9. So dad said, if you take the truck home, make sure the tank's full when you get back. Keys are underneath the brick in the front yard.
We're gonna coffee's on at 6. Scotch pours at 5.
Yeah.
What you do between work hours and sleep,
That's up to you.
that's up to you, buddy. But like when it's work hours, you're mine.
Okay, and then so the funny thing for me was, this is obviously a result of my parents parenting children and then having quite a large window and then starting to parent children again, where they already had like we're way too old to have children pop a top, and then they're like, fuck, now we got this other kid again. And I remember a time when my mother like had this weird, so I came home from Luther. I moved home from Luther. And Kelsey and I started seeing each other.
So you're in university at the time.
Yeah, I'm in first year university at this point. And like I have because when we lived in dorms, whenever I stayed at Alex Johnson's when I was 15, I slept over there. My parents had to call the school to say it was okay that I was sleeping outside of the dorms. Her parents also had to call in and say that I was sleeping outside the dorms, and then I would go stay over at her house, which was pretty risque, I might say. That's pretty cool of me. Anyway, but so all this had happened for 4 years. I moved home. Then I moved to university, and then Kelsey and I started seeing each other. And then every time we would come home, we would just stay together. We would sleep together in the same bed at the farm. And my mom was all pissed off at me one morning in the kitchen. And I was like, why are you mad at me? Like, I can clearly tell you're upset. And she's like, well, you and Kelsey, it's fine, but you don't need to be flaunting it. And she doesn't need to be sleeping in the same bed. And I was like, I'm 19, like I'm in college. And it was like this thing clicked in her head. She's like, oh yeah, we sent you to boarding school 3 years ago. Like you're not the same age you were when you left a half a decade ago. And she was just like Will Ferrell, old school, like, what happened there? Like she went into like a parenting coma, and then she just kind of sounded, she's like, oh yeah, right, you're like a fully adult man that lives on his own in the city. So yeah, do whatever you want, I guess. But anyway, I thought that was fucking hilarious. It was like, who the fuck am I? What's going on here? So,
I still get stress dreams where I wake up and I'm like, I'm in the dorms until I wake up and realize
I don't get those anymore. I get I'm late for a test.
I'll say too, like, to do with the sleeping thing, I think a part of that attitude comes from the generation your parents belong to, and it is that previous generation to our parents.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it kind of reminds me a little bit of, because it's not necessarily a generational thing, it can also be a regional thing, but like in East End, it seems like people are like 20 years behind, because there's still this weird pervasive attitude about how bastard children aren't legitimate children. It's like 1930s attitudes about things, and it's like it's also like, oh well, we can't sleep in the same bedroom, we're only 29,
we're not married.
Yeah, we're not married. That's a big one, I guess. But like, so it's like, what, like, who are you, Queen Elizabeth in the 1950s?
Yeah,
like, I don't, what does this have to do
your
with it?
obligation to produce legitimate heirs?
Yeah, like I don't, yeah, it's really bizarre. And so like I feel like it's a regional thing more now. Like there are just certain places that are just kind of catching up. But there was generations that was kind of like a pervasive attitude, like across everybody.
Culturally, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think your parents maybe more are still a part of that old guard. And then
like
our parents grew up in like the 70s
like,
and 80s.
Like my grandma's big time, like doesn't know my brother's gay, would not be cool if she found it would like probably break her heart because that's her favorite grandchild. And then if she found out that he was gay, that would destroy her, unfortunately, because she's 96, you fucking assholes. She's grew up in a different time.
No, but we should judge her based on what's relevant today. And the morals of her time are irrelevant now.
She's shackled by the mores of her time. Anyway.
It'd be very tough to change your entire worldview at 96.
Yeah. So, but I think that my mother has inklings of that. Although I think after the third marriage and the adopting bastard children and having a gay son, the world has forced her to update to a more modern perspective.
It seems like that's the only way with people who accept that weird, because it's like there's like biblical morality, right, where it's like you base your morality on religious
doctrine,
grounds or whatever. Yeah. But then there are these other things that are grandfathered in, and it's like, I'm sure if we did research, we could trace back to where they popped up and whatever. It's like kind of like the bastard children thing and stuff. It's like probably has some very direct, it's like a kingly thing, whatever. But it's weird that they've adopted, like, it's like they've adopted into their morality, their code of ethics. And it's like, what are you because for me, that's one thing that's very important for me, is to have like a good reason to have like ethical beliefs that I have. And so it's like I'll re-examine every fucking belief I have to like make sure that it actually makes sense within some framework, because I was raised with a moral framework that had no rhyme or reason. And so like if people have stuff like that where it's like, well, it's like that's not good to do that, it's like, why isn't it good? It's like, well, you just don't do it.
Well,
that's just not proper.
It's like those people who are like homophobic, and it's like or like anti-gay marriage. Like, why? It's like, because I think it's gross. It's like that's a good reason to like
I think you're
morally justify something. Like,
yeah, it's like
it's gross. Your opinion of it is that it's gross. Therefore, we should
legislate on it. Like, fuck you. Like, if you think it's gross, stay in your house or whatever. With anything, it's like if you're like,
half the population thinks pineapple on pizza is gross, therefore it should be illegal.
Illegal, yeah.
Like,
it's like,
what?
Sorry, it's not how we're doing things. That's the thing. It's like, if you're going to believe something fervently enough to dictate the actions of another individual, you should maybe have good reasons for thinking.
And the other thing is, and this is actually really funny. So I, as I'm sure I've mentioned on this program before, I am a huge PBS documentary fan, particularly the ones produced and directed by Ken Burns. Ken Burns also does a wonderful 3-part, 3-hour, like an hour each, documentary on the Prohibition, and they talk a lot about because obviously there's like this huge. They pose the Prohibition as the city versus the rural areas, and like rural Anglo-Saxon areas against like urban Catholic, Italian, Irish, like they didn't want immigrants because at that time those were immigrants. You know, now it's like, you know, people of different ethnicities, but before it was like
it was all the people who were displaced from World War I and World War
yeah,
II.
and so
And
no,
those-
this is pre that.
Pre that even?
Yeah,
Oh, right.
Prohibition.
Was pre World War One.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it was. Yeah,
Pre and then into and
Yeah.
post.
Yeah.
A little bit.
yeah. So, what I find fascinating about that is they talk about how there's all these generations that think that they're the rebels. You know, it's like one of the documentarians or one of the people that they interview talks about how everybody thinks that their generation is the one that invented sex. It's like our generation is the one that invented like short skirts and like 50 Cent being, you know, Disco Inferno shit and like grinding. Like we all think that we're the sex revolution.
But then you're shocked when you hear something about like the 60s, for example.
No, it's like, and then you go to the
fucking wild
20s,
that was,
and
yeah.
and one of the guys in the 20s is like, yeah, prohibition brought along, because suddenly when nobody was legally allowed to drink, everyone was drinking, and bars didn't close ever because they were already operating illegally. So it's like kids drank, women drank, everyone drank, and they drank all hours of the night, and everybody was hammered the whole time. And he says, of the people of the 20s, the one of the large discoveries is that men discovered the clitoris. That was the big thing in the 1920s, and then things got a little bit sexier. So it's funny that we look back on the 1920s as like the staunch, like, you know,
Well, a conservative time.
yeah, but actually, like, everyone was just super young and sexy, and then they just grew into like being shackled by these ethical codes and nonsense.
So, knowing what we know about the history of alcohol prohibition, what does that say about our society as it relates to prohibition of most drugs in general?
The big difference is this, and although I'm a proponent of looking into the government taking a good strong look at decriminalization of all drugs, but alcohol has a much longer history and is a much more cultural thing, whereas marijuana also has cultural things, but nothing is pervasive as alcohol. Like nothing even comes close.
Marijuana is
No,
equally
it's
as pervasive. 100%.
No, not globally. No,
yes,
no,
yes, yeah.
no, absolutely not.
100%.
Absolutely not.
I also don't think it's a good reason to base
Yeah.
legislation shouldn't be based on this thing is old.
No, it's not that it's old. It's just like it is ingrained in culture. Like heroin doesn't have this integration in culture, like
What does that have to do with legislating?
because like you're
It's not based on. That's not like factual. That's not like a.
Yeah,
you're
it's not a
giving
good-
me
that's not
you're
a
giving
good
me
or
any,
bad.
Like
Also, what
that's not a
cultures
good
are we
reason.
talking about?
That's like it's like let's say we had some tradition where it's like we burned a guy at a stake every year, and it's like we've been doing it for 400 years, so we got to keep doing it. It's like it's not a very good reason.
no,
Like,
but
you got to give me. It's like just saying something's ingrained in culture is not a great reason to.
no, I'm not saying that's the only reason. I'm just saying the reason that there is not a direct correlation between like apples and oranges. There's a little apples and oranges comparison between hard drugs and alcohol, in the sense that like
Oh, as to the reason why the one is seen differently,
Yes.
culturally, yes. I don't.
I'm not saying
I
the
don't think it's a
reason,
reason that
why
it-
we should do it. I'm saying why it exists. Why
Why
this has happened
that's,
is that like
that's yeah.
why the prohibition of alcohol failed so quickly in the grand scheme of time.
Yes, I
is
would-
because
yeah,
it was so
that's-
culturally pervasive that it was,
that's
and
probably true.
you know, it's was so vastly consumed up to that point that, you know,
Yeah, it had a long history. People knew what it was. They weren't scared of it.
Also, it depends on what culture you're talking about, because marijuana has been part of like culture since indigenous times.
yes, I'm sure,
like-
but there's smaller groups. Like alcohol as a whole has been like it's such a globally pervasive thing.
It's certainly more pervasive, but like it's anyways. I'm not gonna.
Yes,
get
no,
into
marijuana
that.
is certainly pervasive. I'm just saying, like, alcohol is like rooted, like they have
The
record of.
important thing is what should we base legislation upon, and that should be based upon science and data and peer-reviewed study. That's
And-
what we should
and-
base legislation
and
upon.
history, facts.
Well, I don't fucking. Yeah, well, yeah. Facts.
In this
Like,
case,
I
history.
want to see, like, if you say this thing should be illegal, why? And then show me the fucking studies, and then you need to show me 16 more
Oh,
studies.
absolutely.
And like that's why it needs to be illegal, not because you think it's scary. Like that's not a good enough reason to fucking make something
No.
illegal.
Exactly, and that's the big thing with drug prohibition currently. Beyond the, and marijuana will be legalized
everywhere.
everywhere
for-
within the next 5 years probably. I'm going to say 10 years for sure.
I mean, there will be holdouts for sure, but the United States.
Yeah, all the major
drop and then
players.
The United Arab Emirates might take a bit to come around.
Yeah, well, who gives a fuck? But no, that again, when we before marijuana legalization, when we were talking about drug use, we were really talking about marijuana use, because at the time when marijuana wasn't legal, marijuana use in terms of all illicit drug use was like 4.5 out of 5 of the drug use. So now what's left of what we're talking about, most of the most prevalent drugs are hallucinogens.
Yeah, certainly.
Magic mushrooms, LSD, that kind of thing. And then all the rest of it is like a very small percentage.
Yeah, like marijuana wouldn't even have been close.
No. And then
all the other drugs combined wouldn't even have been close.
No.
In comparison to marijuana consumption.
And like the opiate crisis, again, like that's a legal drug, but it's a prescription drugs being abused. And like you look at what's happening with that, utter insanity.
Well, it really is, and I don't understand how they can continue to not view pharmaceuticals in a different light.
Yeah.
Like in a similar light that they are to the illegal opiate crisis.
Well, that's the thing with the negative things about drugs in our society. If we look at the real problems, and we're not talking, because the real reason it's legislated is upon racial lines and upon like moralistic, like you shouldn't do that because X, Y, Z. In terms of like if we
again going back to like that ethical code of like you shouldn't do it because you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, exactly, because it offends sensible people don't do X, and it's like well, we shouldn't base our legislation off that. But in terms of like the actual negative effects of drugs, most of it has to do with the fact that it's an illegal substance. Deaths and overdose, like most people are dying because there's not a regulated, like if there's a regulated, you're getting this amount of heroin. If you overdosed, it would be because you did it on purpose.
Yeah, certainly.
Right? Like it's because people don't know the
there's not education
adulterants that are in their drugs. They don't know the purity of their drugs. That's a problem that could be resolved with legalization. Again, addiction is not a criminal problem.
No.
So like treating it as such causes a bunch of problems.
I mean,
funding crime.
Yeah, exactly. It's funding crime, and largely it comes down to addiction is largely a mental health crisis more than a drug crisis, and it's not a legal issue. It's not an enforcement issue. It's a fucking mental health issue.
And all the countries that have treated it as such and at least decriminalized it, we're talking about specifically. I think the one they reference all the time is in Amsterdam, is in Holland.
Yeah,
they talk about the heroin clinics there. That's the big thing. And like they did like a half measure in Vancouver that isn't seeing the results that they wanted, that it was supposed to, because they didn't execute it properly, is my understanding of it.
Like what is the role of a safe injection site? Like you go there to get clean needles and shoot up?
Yeah,
and like
safe injection sites, I don't know how I feel about those. Like I know like the real move is to do a proper like a heroin clinic where you can get heroin from the clinic, and they inject you with enough so you don't experience withdrawal symptoms. And you go every 12 hours and you get your heroin, and there's no expectation that you have to get off of it. There's no pressure, but when you have put these people in a place every day to get their high, you're able to connect them with a bunch of other resources. And surprise, when you provide people with lots of good options for taking care of themselves, most people are going to get off the heroin. And
have you seen anything from Soft White Underbelly, either of you?
Yeah, a ton.
Fran,
I
have you
love
seen
their
it?
content.
No. Essentially, what it is I don't know much about the filmmaker, and I've only ever seen just tons of the small clips. But essentially, they just talk to people like, is it all in LA? Like in
No, he travels. There's people. He got someone from. He has like an inbred family from.
Oh right, yeah. And anyway, so they just talk about a lot of it comes down to like drug abuse. And one of the saddest things I saw was
criminals, pimps.
This guy that was like, yeah, like he's talking about being a heroin addict, and the interviewer's like, well, like where do you see yourself in 5 years? And he's like, hopefully dead. I'm like, holy fuck, that sucks. Like, no wonder you're shooting up. Mm-hmm. Like, your thing is, I hope I'm dead in 5 years. Why would you quit?
Well, because that's the thing with it, especially in the States. Not that it's not a problem in Canada also, but I think the U.S. is the one that it's most apparent there's an incredible crisis going on. But once you're an addict, and you also, if to admit you're an addict, you also have to admit you're a criminal. And like, while there is drug court and stuff, like, how many drug addicts are forever in the criminal justice system and have that stamp of criminal on them as well?
Yeah,
and now you're part of that system where recidivism is at what, like 90%. So you're trying to like stay clean from a substance and stay out of a system that's designed to keep you going back into it. Like, fuck.
And this one guy, he talks about, they're like, well, why do you, like, he's like, I want to quit. And they're like, well, why do you keep shooting up? And he's like, well, while I'm high, while I'm experiencing the high, I'm obviously, my cares are nil. When I'm coming down off the high, my problem is that I'm a heroin addict. And for the short periods of time I've been clean, I have 15 years worth of bullshit I have to try and clean up. And he's like, I just can't face it. Like, I've stolen money from my family. I've destroyed all my relationships. Like, I have to start from ground zero. And I'm like, he just wants to keep going for another loop in the washing machine because he doesn't want to fucking face the, he doesn't want to face the.
That's where, and the thing is, that's someone who obviously has no money, no support. So therefore has no reasonable access to any type of outside help that could help him tackle that problem.
Right.
But if there was a system in place where it wasn't
support,
a criminal problem, it was a mental health problem, it would be dealt with differently. That person would have access to resources. Yeah. And the thing is, like, this is all empirically backed based on studies that have been done in other countries where they've operated these clinics and they've had incredible crime drops in crime rate and seeing lasting change.
Look at what happened with Narcos. What the fuck is his name? The drug lord.
Pablo
Escobar.
Yeah.
Like, they started moving drugs to the States, and now they had so much money, they were just burying it, lining the house. Like, you are funneling money into organized crime.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's crazy how much money is going into that. And like, if you can eliminate some of that, there's just so much of the illegality of these drugs. There's so many ripple effects that are funding things like human trafficking.
It's directly comparable to prohibition and Al Capone.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the same fucking thing.
Absolutely.
That's why
who was public enemy number one for the FBI back in that day? Al Capone, gangsters. What were they doing? Mostly
because one of the substances
smuggling booze in from Canada and the United States. So
yeah,
I don't know. Same thing with the
one of the guys at the
Narcos in Colombia.
One of the guys in the Prohibition documentary says Prohibition was the high school finishing school and PhD program for organized crime in the United States. They had so much money and so much
power
that they learned how to organize like an army and how to effectively do black book accounting. And like, they had so much freedom to outsource these things and
resources,
build an empire.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Incredible. An incredible. If you've never seen it, it's pretty tough to find, and I had to pirate it to watch it. It used to be on Netflix. Unfortunately, Netflix fucked up and they got rid of it. It's not on American or Canadian Netflix anymore. And if you don't live in the States and a VPN won't work on PBS, because I guess the only company that's smart enough is the government-owned fucking the government-owned
public
broadcasting service that allows people to see this kind of content. But it's a great one, and it's not long. It's only like some like that Civil War one's like fucking 41 hour episodes. But this is not long at all.
Yeah.
3 hours is whatever, and
I
you can
mean,
watch it in 3 sittings.
Another amazing Prohibition series is Boardwalk Empire, HBO.
Never
Steve
saw it.
Buscemi. It's good.
It's obviously like a fictionalized account.
It's about
dramatization.
he plays what is he? He's not the mayor. He's the what is he? Like the accountant for the finance minister for the city of Atlanta.
Oh, I see.
And it's all Prohibition era, and he like runs the city. And it's
So, Andrew, why don't
awesome.
you give us one more? Am I the asshole?
Sure.
I think it's important to note that we don't run Reddit. Like, you guys might think we run Reddit, but we don't. I know Fran was part of the Reddit partnership program in 2006.
I might still run Reddit. I'm not sure what my role is in the organization anymore. I should check my bank statements. I might still be the guy. It was like an e-transfer thing that I did
Fran is Q.
to get the. Well, yeah, initially.
Are you Q?
Well, like initially.
Are you Q?
Like from James Bond?
No.
Oh, like the QAnon.
Yes.
Yeah, why not? I'm Q.
I'm going to ask you one more time. Are you Q?
Say it again.
I'm going to ask you one more time. Are you Q?
Yeah.
I knew it.
I fucking knew it.
Hit us with one, Andrew.
Come get me. Come get me, liberals.
Okay. Once
I got a fucking microphone. You guys see my microphone? I got a microphone. What was that song I was singing to start the podcast out? A single mom who works too hard, loves her kids and never stops, with a gentle hand and the heart of a fighter. I'm a survivor. Hit us with one, Andy.
Okay, Andy Dufresne. Am I the asshole for calling my sister-in-law racist after she compared my cooking to, quote, making kung pao chicken? For context, I have been married to my wife for 10 years, and we're a mixed-race couple. I'm Asian, and she's Caucasian. I've gotten along with her family, mother-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, but I always felt like her father-in-law and other sister-in-law, Sarah, never liked me. I'm a professionally trained chef with 15 plus years of experience, and I work at a high-end Chinese restaurant, a spin-off of a popular one in Beijing, in a large U.S. city. My crew and I have won several awards, and I've been explicitly told I'll be the next executive chef. Sarah is also a professionally trained chef and works at a popular upscale French restaurant in the city. She constantly brags about it and, no joke, compares herself out loud to Ramsay and Bourdain. Whenever I'm at my mother-in-law and father-in-law's house and helping out in the kitchen, Sarah is always criticizing everything I do, whether it's chopping, braising, marinating, etc. She always butts in with comments like, I think you should actually do X like this. I've been patient for my wife and sidestepping these comments, saying things like, thanks, but I think I'll stick to the way I do it. Things came to a head 2 weeks ago when my wife, father-in-law, mother-in-law, and I were in her parents' kitchen prepping dinner for my mother-in-law's birthday. We were running a bit behind, so things were heated, which I kind of like because it reminds me of work. And that's when Sarah walked in. She took one look at what I was doing, scoffed, and said something like, oh, wow, okay, so that's not the right way of doing things. It hit a nerve, and I pretty sternly told her to stop criticizing my cooking and that I'm also a chef like her. She laughed and said, making kung pao chicken at some Chinese restaurant doesn't count. The kitchen went silent. Father-in-law snorted/chuckled, and my mother-in-law yelled, Sarah, what is wrong with you? I stopped what I was doing, swore at her, and called her a racist piece of shit, apologized to my mother-in-law for not being able to stay, and left for home with my wife. Apparently, this caused a massive fight after we left, with my mother-in-law/brother-in-law/other sister-in-law taking my side, and my father-in-law/Sarah saying it was a joke but kind of true and that I was being too sensitive. And the extended family somehow got wind of this, and now everyone is arguing and taking sides with my wife, and even getting texts from some of her cousins apologizing for Sarah's behavior. Despite being on my side, my wife is begging me to apologize so that the fighting will stop, but I refuse to because fuck Sarah and her blatant racism. Am I the asshole?
I absolutely don't think you're the asshole. Is this the sister? Like, is this his wife's sister or his wife's sister? Her wife's husband's?
No.
Like she's the blood sister. Like the mother was yelling at her, was her mother. Okay, that makes sense.
It's just they're his sister-in-law.
Yeah, I was gonna say my brother-in-law at my home started criticizing something I do professionally. I'd fucking kill him.
One of your siblings.
But no, absolutely, you're not the asshole. I mean, I would never expect him to say sorry. If it was me being pragmatic, I would just do it to get it over with and swallow my prize.
Man, on one hand, I agree with you. On the other hand, it's like, fuck that toxic bitch. Like,
I don't disagree. It was just like, if that's what my wife wanted me to do, I would do it to be pragmatic and fuck her. And then I would just ignore her from there on out. But I don't blame him for not doing that. Like, you don't have to take the high ground. You're not a bad person for not taking the high road. Like,
is that taking the high road, or is that just avoiding confrontation?
I don't even know if it's taking the high road.
I don't think that's taking the high road.
Sorry, I didn't mean to say it like that.
No, I'm just saying. I don't think that's taking the high road. But I get it. Like, confrontation sucks, and avoiding it is preferable.
It's not about avoiding confrontation. It's just like,
I think that directly is what you're
the confrontation
maybe what
already
you're saying
happened.
is like, you're coming to the realization that you're hitting an immovable object. Like you're like, this person will not change.
Yeah.
And so if you're coming to that realization, you're like, I would still like to interact with this person who won't change, then yes, you're gonna have to shift.
And you don't even have to interact with her. I'm just saying, if the choice comes down to like,
no, I'm saying if you
we can't be around my family anymore if you don't apologize, then I'm apologizing to be pragmatic, because I'm not just gonna ignore her family for the rest of my life.
Oh, like the whole family won't talk to her.
Well, I'm assuming that they can't be in the room together or whatever until.
Well, no, the whole family is just putting pressure on the situation to be resolved, and it's a matter of if it, I think the implication kind of is.
So what does he apologize for?
I mean, okay, here we go.
Yelling.
Call her an asshole, bitch.
There's updates on this. This is part of why I picked this one.
Okay.
So, update. So edit. My wife also informed me now Sarah may be in trouble at work, and she's blaming me for it. Apparently, one of her coworkers heard her rant about what happened and reported it to management. Edit. To clarify, Sarah is blaming me, though my wife is partly blaming me. Huh? Okay, that's a weird sentence. Update. Edit to
Sarah shot herself.
So it looks like one of my wife's cousins found the post and put it on Sarah's Facebook wall, going, "This is you, right?" Her Facebook friends are starting to comment with things like, "If this is you, Sarah, then I'm disappointed. I think Sarah is still at work. Shit might be hitting the fan soon. And now my wife is pissed too. We'll try to update, but might have to delete post if things go nuclear." Edit 3/update 2 was considering removing, but I just got a voicemail from my father-in-law that, quote, my presence was only being tolerated up until this point, and threatened a, quote, world of hurt if I didn't delete this post. Officially going to keep this post up, and if you're still reading this, Doug, I'm very disappointed in you. You're better than this. We'll also continue to update, and thanks again for all your support, folks. Edit 4/update 3. Lots of stuff just went down. My wife got a call from her sister-in-law. From wife's paraphrasing, Sarah started screaming/crying at her the moment my wife picked up, and said that she just got demoted because of her Asian slur husband. Apparently, some of her coworkers have her on Facebook and showed the post to management, which combined with her earlier rant, double whammied her back to being a line cook, and now she might get fired. My wife told her to go fuck herself and is now solidly on my side after taking the verbal abuse from Sarah and reading some of the comments here. My wife is still the opposite of happy, though. Well, fair enough. My wife called her mother-in-law and asked her what the fuck was going on with father-in-law. Mother-in-law was confused, so my wife played back the voicemail I had on my phone, and apparently my mother-in-law literally just walked away from the phone without hanging up and started screaming at father-in-law. Facebook post has now devolved into a clusterfuck.
Oh, she screamed at her husband for saying that to him about. Oh, wow.
Facebook post has now devolved into a clusterfuck flame war with family and friends jumping in. Suffice it to say, it has now officially gone nuclear. Me right now, and there's a gift from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, where the ship's blowing
Oh,
up and
yeah.
walking off.
Yeah, ship's blowing up as he's walking off. That's the guy, the poster saying that. I think I'm going to have to call this today. I'll make an update post when the dust settles. Thanks again, folks. Update 5. Wow. Okay, this is long, but I think it might be worth it. Update 5, edit 5, update 4. Turns out I'm not allowed to post an update post for some reason. No, you provided all your updates, the original post. I'd like to clarify that I got my wife and mother-in-law's permission to post this update out of respect for them and their privacy. Suffice to say, it's been kind of nuts the past week. My wife and I had to turn off social media for a bit because of the shitstorm caused by our cousin putting the post on Facebook. Some people even tried to call the restaurant I work at to get me fired as retribution. Luckily, everyone there has 100% on my side. Or as my boss puts it, fuck Sarah, fuck those racists, fuck them some goddamn much. Those aren't my words. I guess it didn't help them that the staff, that half the calls involved threats, screaming about more racial slurs. Didn't hear any updates from her family, even though we assumed shit at the fan. Mother-in-law found out about father-in-law's threatening voicemail. But that changed on Sunday. Still disappointed, but it changed on Sunday night when mother-in-law suddenly showed up at our door with overnight bags. After we took a moment to help unpack and calm down, she spilled the beans on everything. Father-in-law, aka Doug. Apparently, the mother-in-law and father-in-law were already having trouble in their marriage. It is only made worse with a certain 2016 presidential election. She's a Dem, and he had apparently gone more far right since then. Seems that a line was crossed with the Kung Pao incident and his voicemail. When he refused to apologize for anything, typical Doug, she asked for a divorce, and he went berserk. She didn't feel safe there, so that's when she came over.
Holy shit, did we
Other brother-in-law and sister-in-law live out of town. Extended family, aka the Great Facebook War of 2021. You may have been able to tell already, but the extended family was largely arguing, fighting, divided along political lines for a few years now. And my cousin's Facebook post was likely just the light to set off the powder keg. According to my mother-in-law, the fallout has allegedly already led to some breakups, excommunication of some family members, and even an argument that ended with police involvement. Haven't verified this myself, though. Sarah, sister-in-law. According to my mother-in-law, Sarah came over to her place on Friday. The writing was on the wall, and she was basically forced to quit. Despite her trying to start from scratch as a line cook, the entire staff turned against her. Nothing was coming back from the dish pit for her, and she was getting the cold shoulder. She's a great chef. I will admit this is true. But they took no chances since it turns out, shit you not, they're partly owned by a Chinese investment company. Found this hard to believe and didn't want to add this detail, but it turned out to be true after some research. Won't say any further.
So her restaurant was Sarah's.
Yeah, won't say any more for any further for privacy. Word also got around in the local industry, and Sarah is essentially blacklisted from high-end establishments. She's now considered selling her home and moving to find work. As much as I don't like her and found her behavior horrifying, I didn't intend for this to happen, and I've reached out to some buds in other states to see if they had any openings. Whether or not she wants to take this it's up to her. And no, she has not apologized for anything either. But I still want to be able to be a decent person to her. It sure as hell doesn't feel like a happy ending. Perhaps bittersweet justice, but that's all I can give you. Thank you all for your support and for reading.
Wow. Is that more interesting than the prehistoric podcast? I'll tell you that right now.
I didn't read all the updates. I didn't realize that that is just like the definition of throwing a pebble in the pond and watching the ripples.
Like that one interaction,
one comment, one sentence.
If Sarah had kept her fucking mouth, I mean, something was going to get set off. If all that happened,
it's true. It was not a if, it was a when.
Yeah, but still.
Pro tip, also an adulting tip. Unless somebody's going to hurt themselves or others or break your shit, don't give unsolicited over-the-shoulder cooking advice. No one ever fucking wants it. It's always a fucking dick thing to do.
And he's a chef. She obviously is some bitter bitch. Like some awful fucking...
Power tripping.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And also clearly racist. Like, I'm not usually one to throw that around, but like...
Well, apparently
Like-
she used a slur. So, like, it's tough at that point. It's like, could the Kung Pao chicken thing be construed and misunderstood? Probably. But it's like, once you're using racial slurs directed at somebody of that race, sorry, bitch, you're a fucking racist. Like, learn. Figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the really racist thing is like assuming that because he doesn't cook white people food, it somehow makes him like
Not a professional.
not a professional chef. It's like, I don't care if he works at like a hole in the wall China. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, he's a chef.
He could be
15 years experience.
Yeah, he
Like,
could be the executive chef at Montana's. I'm sure he's still professionally trained. Knows how to cut a fucking onion.
yeah.
That
Exactly.
is something else.
You're not an asshole, like, if you're wondering.
No, like nothing about. Yeah, I was gonna say like going no contact with those
Sticking
people
up
is
for
best.
yourself is not being an asshole. Like,
No,
No,
absolutely not.
fuck that woman.
I think the question was more so, should he have, after standing up for himself in the moment, should he have just like backed off and let things settle? And I
Which it sounds like
It sounded like he
kinda tried
basically
to.
did. Like, he didn't say anything. He just made.
He didn't apologize.
I don't think.
Well,
it
but
would've
that's
stopped.
that. See, that's not just letting things settle. That's
No,
you
that's-
now actively trying to.
That's
I
true. That's
definitely-
actively recanting.
I
That's
don't
true.
think that would have stopped the fallout from.
No,
what it sounds
no.
like.
No,
I love how the
I
parents
also
got
don't
divorced.
think the Britain and the United States should have like kowtowed to Nazi Germany. Like, I also don't
I
think
do. That was a great policy. Policy of
So-
appeasement. Prehistoric podcast supports policy of appeasement. Neville Chamberlain. That was awesome. You gave us a great start.
And they had
Thank
such
you.
slick uniforms.
Such slick uniforms.
But yeah, it's just like
That is
If somebody is
crazy,
like-
that story. And it's way too detailed to be
like
fake.
so objectively in the wrong. Like, it's just like I have no sympathy for the sister. There's not a shred of anything that I'm like, I feel sorry for you. It's like you are in a hole of your own. You are in a grave of your own making, and you won't. All you have to do to make all of this end is say sorry.
Back down.
And stop giving
the sooner
your
she
shitty
said,
advice.
the sooner she
condescending
said,
advice.
the sooner she said sorry, the lesser the consequences would have been.
Yes, absolutely. It's all she needed to do. Had she just said sorry that day that he got mad at her,
Her parents would still be together. You were the reason your parents got
Like
divorced.
quite literally, she is the well.
I'm the reason
Not
my
the
parents
only
got
reason.
divorced. My parents told me no, but I sat them down and I said, no, guys, it was me.
I like it.
I've been actively trying to break you guys up for a long time.
Yeah, and I was very young at the time. So, again, maybe think about smoking and drinking when you're pregnant. Because I was able to break up my parents' marriage before I was 5. What were you doing? Shitting yellow? Bitch?
When I was 5, I don't remember much from when I was 5.
Thank you guys very much for joining us for episode 11 of the Prehistoric Podcast. This has been the hour of ASMR. What is ASMR?
I can't remember what it's called.
Audioly?
Audio,
Audioly?
auditory,
Auditory sensory. Let's figure it out here. What does ASMR stand for?
Sensory meridian response.
Oh.
According to the New York Times, when no existing term could meet both conditions, she made up a new one, autonomous sensory meridian response, or ASMR.
And
That makes sense.
it
It's
is-
very specific.
is this-
It's a really
is-
good,
it's
really
supposed
good definition, or really good.
it's
Thanks for
supposed
that.
to be like soothing. Is that the idea?
It's like when you get the
Those
physical
goosebumps,
reaction from
physical
that.
reaction.
Yeah.
There are people who get like a. I guess it's similar to
reaction?
like
It's a part of your brain.
Yeah, it's
Do they
like
get
a
an
very
erection?
pleasurable response to
Do they get an
ASMR.
erection?
I don't know. You'd have to ask them.
Is it a sexual thing?
Some people probably.
I think everything is a sexual thing. Someone.
Okay, so thank you guys.
Rule
for,
34.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Shut up. Thank you guys very much for joining us. Thank you very much for joining us.
Can you fit that whole mic in your mouth?
No.
That's pretty good. Thanks very much for watching the podcast. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you so much. Don't stop watching.